Words have been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I grew up in a rather bohemian household, surrounded by books and writers. My mother, Margaret, was a top journalist in Fleet Street, one of the first women actually to go into war zones, and then became a best-selling author. And my father was a brilliant, if intense and rather eccentric poet. His party trick was he was expert in Jungian psychoanalysis, and he used to like to psychoanalyse people at parties, and my mother would have to rescue them from him. And if he got bored, he would lie down under the dinner table, fall asleep and snore, much to my mother's intense embarrassment. I have also spent most of my life working with words, and as a journalist and also as a communications expert. I've written for a range of publications such as The Independent, The Observer and Ideal Home, and I also ran a magazine group called PR Week for former Deputy Prime Minister and publisher Michael Heseltine. I've also appeared regularly on various news programmes on BBC, Channel 4, ITV, Sky, Today programme, talking as an expert on government spin. In fact, I did so much around the Hutton inquiry that I once went to a party and bumped into Alastair Campbell, and he looked at me rather snidely and said, "You make a rather good living out of me, don't you?" And through my journalism, I also slightly bizarrely became quite close to the public relations directors for the Queen and for Princess Diana, as well as becoming a very good contact, maybe even friend, with Sophie Wessex, who was then a PR woman. And I ended up with some exclusive interviews about Diana's life, and also with an interview with Sophie just before her marriage to Prince Edward. And this apparently made me something of an expert on the royals. And every time there was a royal story came up on television, I would be rolled out. You've probably seen me, you won't recognise me. In those days I had a blonde bob, but the hair has since gone, which I'll come on to. But I was a slightly familiar face at one time. In fact, I remember there was one time when Panorama wanted to interview me just prior to Charles and Camilla's wedding. And I told them quite truthfully I had flu and I just wasn't up to it. And so they rolled up to Oney, my village West Underwood near Oney in North Buckinghamshire, in their big studio van. And they came in and they took all the furniture out of the front room and built a TV studio in the front room. Much to my kids' intense excitement, I couldn't keep them out of there. More recently, I've worked for international aid agency World Vision, Christian aid agency World Vision. I first of all in the UK, here in the office in Fox Milne, where I was Director of Communications and Campaigns. And then for the last 6 years, I was very blessed to run their global communications across all 100 countries in which they operate. And I had the privilege of telling meetings of incredible faith-filled individuals and telling their stories, and sometimes having to be a voice for the voiceless in the face of incredible injustice. In my spare time, I'm also a lay preacher in the Church of St. Peter's and St. Paul's in Oney, nearby in Oney, which I don't know if you know is the church where the hymn Amazing Grace was written. God did something miraculous in my life, and my book Sea changed, and my ministry became about something bigger. It became about reassuring people that the surest path to faith isn't always a straight line, and that God can be found in the most unexpected places, even in a cancer diagnosis. The title of my book was actually inspired by a beautiful poem by my father called Sea Change. And it's a poem about discovering God and the fact that while we may be tempest-tossed, we will not be overcome, and that while we walk through the waters, he'll be with us. From the outset, when I was diagnosed, my family and I decided we were not going to give up hope. And the foundations of that hope were prayer and God's word. We knew that we were surrounded by the prayer of my church family, and I also knew that my World Vision family were praying for me. And it was remarkable. I felt carried on the sea of prayer. It was quite incredible, and it gave me enormous hope. Jesus tells us in Mark 11:23, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. And I decided I was going to cast this mountain of cancer into the sea. Well, the fact that I'm talking today shows that something miraculous happened, something amazing. In fact, God's healing began even before the first treatment. The oncologist said to me, I don't know what to do with you now. He said, because there are no black or white rules, we would not normally put someone through surgery in your situation. He said, but I'm really anxious not to undertreat you, so I think we're going to have to try surgery. It was the best Christmas present I ever had. It was the day before Christmas Eve. And I went back after a month to see the surgeon, and it was a day I will never forget. It was March the 28th, 2015. I walked into his office and he didn't say anything to me. I sat down and he just stared at me long and hard. And he just turned around the report on his desk and pointed to the bottom line of the report, which said, there is no evidence of cancer in her body. Praise the Lord. Yes, when I say that, I still feel quite incredible every time I say it. Now, for a long time, God had been telling me that my work as a journalist and a broadcaster and communicator should be used to declare his word. And I had a strong sense that as important as my work was with World Vision, loving my neighbour, that I shouldn't just pick up where I left off, that I'd been changed quite fundamentally, and that actually God had different work for me to do. But World Vision was wonderful to me during my illness. They supported me for a year when I was unable to work and prayed for me. I used to get messages from Kenya, from Vietnam, from Cambodia saying, we just had a prayer meeting for you. Incredible. So out of loyalty and love for the people there, I decided that I would go back to my job as Chief Communications Officer. I spent a year working on a global strategy, and I also did some work on a project called Giving Word to Our Faith, which God laid in my heart when I was ill, about helping staff, often in secular or very difficult multi-faith contexts, talk more clearly about what their faith means to their work, not to suffer from Christian embarrassment or fear. And this is an incredible piece of work. But when it was finished at the beginning of this year, I was told that there was going to be a reshuffle among the senior management team, and my job was going to be merged with another. Now, my first reaction, as I think most people do, was fairly shocked. But within 2 seconds, I felt this great wave of relief. A sense of peace came over me again. And the thought went through my head very clearly, oh Lord, he's taken away my last excuse. So in February this year, I took a big deep breath and I stepped out and finally began to explore what it really means for me to obey the call to declare the works of God. It's early days, but God's been placing some extraordinary opportunities in my path, not least getting to know you guys. That happened around about this time. And since the publication of Sea Change, I've been going all over the country, speaking to people about my journey. And I met some extraordinary people and had heard some really inspiring stories. And I'm now working on a second book called Soul Scribe, Your Story in God's Narrative, which is about helping people do as I have done, without the impetus of a life-threatening disease, and to look back over your life and to map your existence and see where God has been at work, and potentially tell their story. I've also launched a management and communications consultancy, or it's me, as a consultant, with a particular focus on faith-based organisations. And I focus on mainly strategy development and communications reviews and storytelling. And God has been amazing. I'm already doing some amazing work. Very early on, I was put in contact with the new Bishop of Oxford, Bishop Stephen Croft, and I'm now working with him on his strategy for the 1,000 churches and 400 schools across the diocese. Again, all amazing encounters that brought this about. I'm working with a publishing company, Christian publishing company. I'm working with some NGOs and a Christian foundation as well. So all of these have kind of come about. And the other thing is very, very important, I'm also in the process of being reviewed for potential ordination. So I decided that maybe being an authorised preacher wasn't enough. And that's quite a journey. I don't know if any of you have been on this journey, but it's a long journey, an incredibly powerful journey about a self-exploration, about understanding your faith. And it's a real gift to go on that journey. And against all odds, I am clear of cancer 2.5 years later. There are no signs of recurrence. At first, the doctors kept managing my expectations, and they've given up even doing that now. I just keep getting letters stop saying, Kate's in fine fettle, enjoying life. These are the letters that go to my GP. Significantly, my surgeon, my oncologist, my radiologist and cardiologist have all given approval to this book, Sea Changed. And I remember my oncologist once saying to me, he said, "We doctors don't understand everything." So each day I rise with hope in my heart and I declare, I will not die, but I will live and declare the works of God.